Take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are set to meet at the White House today as a new ceasefire plan is in the works. The Trump administration has drafted a 21-point proposal for ending the war in Gaza, which includes the disarmament of Hamas, but also leaves the door open for a Palestinian state. 2 people have lost their lives in Ukrainian drone strikes in Moscow. Meanwhile, at least 4 people have died and dozens others are missing after Russian barrage in Ukraine. Ukrainian military has stated that Russia launched 595 drones and 48 missiles overnight. Moldova's ruling pro-European Union party has won the parliamentary elections with support from over half of the electorate. This is according to results that are near complete. The election, seen as crucial for the country's integration with the EU, was held amid allegations of Russian interference, including cyber attacks and disinformation. Polish Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski, French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot and German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul have met in Warsaw within the Weimar Triangle framework. The meeting is meant to highlight cooperation of the 3 countries in light of a series of alleged incursions into NATO airspace via drones. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered 200 Oregon and National Guard troops to be deployed under federal authority, while the state has filed a lawsuit challenging Donald Trump's move to send military forces into the city of Portland. Britain is considering tougher rules for migrants seeking permanent residence. Interior Minister Shabana Mahmood says that applicants may need to prove their value to society by paying taxes, having a clean criminal record, speaking English, and participating in community service. Protesters have taken to the streets in Paris, Mexico, and Brazil on the International Safe Abortion Day, demanding access to safe and legal abortions. Activists have called for rights to be guaranteed, with marches highlighting the need for healthcare, safety, and equality in reproductive choices worldwide. A man crashed his vehicle into a church in Michigan and opened fire with an assault rifle, setting the building ablaze and killing at least 4 and injuring 8 others. The alleged suspect died in a shootout with the police. The FBI is now leading the investigation into this matter. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. US President Donald Trump is set to hold talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House regarding a peace deal. President Trump is working on a peace plan for Gaza, which he earlier presented to the leaders of Arab Islamic nations. He is optimistic about the prospects of the deal. Now, this comes as families of the Israeli hostages have written a letter to Trump urging him to help return all 48 hostages to their homes. Now, in the letter, they've also stated that President Trump's approach to the war is in stark contrast to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's, who has expanded the offensive on the ground in Gaza. Now, the families have also urged everyone to be united with one message, that is to release the hostages now. Previously, Hamas stated that they lost contact with 2 of the hostages due to Israeli strikes and have urged the IDF to stop the strikes and withdraw from certain areas. Now, the families fear that the offensive may put the lives of the hostages in further danger. Meanwhile, the global Sumut flotilla has resumed its journey to Gaza after pausing in Greek waters for repairs. The flotilla, made up of about at least 47 civilian boats, now includes Greek vessels and activists from multiple countries. Swedish climate campaigner Greta Thunberg, along with around 40 Italians, is also on board the flotilla. Listen in to what a few flotilla members who are determined to send aid to Gaza have to say.
We are very happy because yesterday we joined the rest of the boats coming from Italy, Spain and Tunisia, and we united as one common fleet of 44 ships. Our next destination is Gaza. Our mission is to break the illegal Israeli siege and create a people's humanitarian corridor. We rise to end the genocide of the Palestinian people. We sail against the complicity of our countries. Demand safe passage for our vessels, because no one is free until we are all free. All eyes on Gaza, all eyes on the fleet.
Our common cause here is to break the siege of Gaza and to contribute to the Palestinian struggle. We urge all people to follow us, to keep an eye on us, and help Palestinians finally achieve their liberation.
Last Wednesday, the flotilla was hit in international waters off the Greek island of Gavdos by drones carrying stun grenades and itching powder. However, no one was injured, but the vessel suffered some damage. The global Sumud flotilla blamed Israel, which did not respond but stated that it will use any means to block access to Gaza. Meanwhile, Italy's Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani has warned of the risks of approaching Israeli waters, proposing that aid could be taken to Cyprus for distribution to Gaza. Additionally, Italy and Spain have deployed Navy ships near the flotilla for humanitarian support, while Greece has guaranteed safe passage through its waters. Organizers expect the flotilla to arrive in Gaza early next week. With us on the broadcast is Eileen Levy, former spokesperson for the State of Israel, joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. At the outset, I would like to ask you about the crucial talks that are set to take place between Trump and Netanyahu. The Trump administration has drafted a 21-point proposal for ending the war. The plan includes the disarmament of Hamas, establishing an international security force, and a development roadmap to rebuild Gaza. But it also leaves the door open for a Palestinian state. In your assessment, how is Israel receiving this plan?
This deal that President Trump is proposing is far from perfect, but if implemented, it gives Israel both of its goals in this war that Hamas started. All of the hostages come back immediately, and Hamas is dismantled. So we need global pressure now on Hamas to accept this deal. The deal basically says Hamas must dismantle itself, and if not, Israel will continue the military campaign to dismantle Hamas's terrorist army. So it cannot launch another October 7th massacre and cannot attack Israel again. So I think Israel is likely to accept this deal. It's working closely together with President Trump. It removes Hamas from power. It brings back those hostages. And we need pressure on Hamas and its patrons, specifically Qatar, to make sure they accept this deal and finally end the war they started 2 years ago.
And speaking of Hamas, some analysts argue that isolating Hamas has failed, and they've called for engagement. Meanwhile, others say that even if Hamas is dislodged militarily, but no stable alternative is installed in Gaza, we could see the re-emergence of something even more radical. What is your response to such arguments?
Hamas has never been more isolated than it is now. When it launched this war nearly 2 years ago, the UN didn't condemn it. The UN didn't call for the hostages to be released. The UN didn't demand Hamas relinquish power. It's doing that now. Even Arab nations are telling Hamas it's game over. You have to free the hostages. You have to end this war you started. There is pretty much international unanimity that the war Hamas started must end with Hamas removed from power. So now we need pressure on Hamas to accept that, to concede defeat, to leave the stage and free the hostages. But you're right, we have to make sure that after this war, we don't end up with just another terror organization. That is why it is important that we have not only the demilitarization of Gaza, but also the de-radicalization of the population. And the ideology, the jihadi Islamist ideology that led people to celebrate the October 7th massacre, to support Hamas's atrocities, that has to go away. That has to be removed, or we will only have more violence coming from Gaza in future. So this war has to end not only with the destruction of Hamas and the demilitarization of Gaza, but also with de-radicalization, so we can open the page to a future of peace and prosperity in the region.
At the same time, Trump has also expressed that he will not allow Netanyahu to annex the West Bank. Now, in your assessment, will Donald Trump walk the talk, or has this statement merely been made to assuage the concerns of America's Arab Gulf allies, especially after the airstrike in Doha?
I think Israel's priority right now is to end the war that Hamas started nearly 2 years ago. Let's remember, this is the longest war in Israel's history. And it's not just with Gaza. This is a regional war by the Iranian axis against Israel that has seen us attacked on 7 fronts. Just last night, we had a ballistic missile attack from Yemen. The siren sounded at 1 a.m. Millions of people, including me, had to run for shelter in the middle of the night because we came under attack from Yemen. Israel wants to end this war, and this war needs to end with all the hostages home and with Hamas removed from power so it cannot launch another war at a time of its choosing. And I think if President Trump puts on the table a realistic proposal to get all the hostages home and to end this war, that is Israel's priority right now.
And speaking of ending the war, there's a lot of speculation regarding post-war Gaza as to who would govern it and how they do so. From your perspective, what viable long-term strategies can Israel pursue that address its core security concerns?
Gaza, after this war, needs to be placed under an international trusteeship. We need an international mechanism to govern Gaza, de-radicalize it, and put in place the conditions for sustainable peace and prosperity. If elections were held in the Palestinian Authority now, Hamas would win. Hamas would win a landslide. So there's no point having elections immediately just to let Hamas in through the back door. You need an international authority that will de-radicalize the population so it's ready for a future of peace with Israel. And included in that, you're going to need Israeli security control as well to make sure that Hamas cannot rebuild its terrorist army, or other terrorist groups cannot rebuild their forces and the tunnels and the missiles in order to launch another war against Israel. And I hope if this war ends with the people of Gaza understanding that it was a mistake to launch this war in the first place, that this vision of a forever jihad against Israel has brought disaster on them, then we'll be able to turn a leaf towards a future of peace and prosperity, but it's going to need an international trusteeship for that to happen.
All right, sir. With that, I would like to thank you for taking out time speaking to us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting our focus away from the Middle East towards further developments coming in. We're now learning that at least 2 people have been killed and dozens have been injured in Moscow following Ukrainian drone attacks, as per Russian authorities. Now, reportedly, Russia's air defense units have destroyed 84 Ukrainian drones overnight. The Russian Defense Ministry has also stated that forces carried out massive strikes across Ukraine, targeting military facilities in Kharkov, Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia. Meanwhile, Ukraine has reported 173 combat engagements along the front lines. The Russian missiles and UAVs were intercepted by Ukrainian air defenses, and reportedly in Belgorod region, UAV attacks damaged homes and killed 2 civilians as well. Multiple districts including Alexeyevsky and Grivoronsky and Shebeskinsky were hit, causing casualties and property damage as well. With us on the broadcast is Major General G.G. Dwivedi, a senior geopolitical and strategic expert joining us from New Delhi. Thank you for taking our time speaking to us at NewsX World. Recently at the UNGA in New York, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that Russia is open to negotiations. However, we're now seeing that Russia has scaled up its offensive. More than 500 drones were launched overnight. And Russia is also claiming that Kiev has given no signals about resuming talks. In your assessment, how long will we see this war drag on?
Well, Pia, firstly, thank you for having me on your show. The point is, if you look at the developments over the last couple of days, the intensity of fighting has definitely increased, especially after President Putin summit with President Trump in Alaska. You see that there is a definite accretion in the level of fighting. And the fighting is scaled up on both the fronts. One is the aerial warfare, where the Russians are going for massive strikes. 2 days back, they had struck Kyiv and the areas around. and there were civilian casualties, and now they are again using the missile to attack Zaporizhia and Kharkiv. And also at the same time, there's I think increase in the ground operation because as Ukraine has reported that there were almost 173 odd engagements on the ground. On the Ukrainian side, they are responding, but they are defending because their capability vis-a-vis Russia is far less. But nonetheless, they are also giving a strong message that they may be down, but they are not out. And at the same time, they are taking some toll of the Russian forces as well. So, if I can summarize that the both sides are engaged. Russia is more on the aggressive, while Ukraine is on the defensive. But nonetheless, the level of fighting has increased over last couple of days. And coming to the statement of Russian Foreign Minister Mr. Lavrov, well, I think Russia is not walking the talk. At one side, Russia says that they are prepared for negotiation. On the other side, on the ground, their aggressiveness has only increased. So therefore, I don't think President Putin or Russia are in any mood to end up the hostilities soon. So Ukraine has no choice but to respond. And the level of fighting, as I said, has only seen upward trend. There is no real, I would say, scaling down on the ground. So therefore, I don't think either Russia is walking the talk. At the same time, Ukraine is also is not going to give up anytime soon. Pia.
Follow up to that, Zelensky is seeking American Tomahawk missiles to gain an edge on the ground. We do know that the Ukrainians are already using the Patriot missile system as well. In this context, will the Trump administration now consider this proposal as well?
Well, initially President Trump was not in favor of giving any more further aid to Ukraine. In February meeting with President Zelensky, in fact, President Trump has said very categorically that you better come to the negotiation table because you will not be able to win the war. But that stance changed this month when President Trump met President Zelensky. He assured that America and Europe will give all the support possible for Ukraine to carry on this war, and even assured that Ukraine has the chances of regaining back the territory it has lost. So I think that with the change of mindset, while the Patriot missiles are very effective in taking on the aerial strikes by Russia, a Tomahawk missile which actually give a greater boost to the air defense of Ukraine, because today Ukraine has no air force worth the while. So all they are depending upon largely on drones and on the missile which they are using very selectively because they don't have these missiles in big numbers. So I think that if President Trump, going by his statement, would agree to give Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, this will definitely revamp Ukrainian air defense, and they will be able to face the Russian airstrike for better. But one has to see whether this is actually practically implemented on the ground. But nonetheless, all I can say is, in given current situation, Ukraine requires strong air defense systems to take on the Russian aerial strikes, and also on the ground, as the fighting has scaled up, they would need a lot of weapon systems like rocket launchers, artillery pieces, to ensure that they are able to defend the current front line and do not yield any more ground. So all I can say is that Ukraine requires the air defense system, and in all fairness, they must get it. Only then they can take on the Russian onslaught. Otherwise, they'll be paying a very heavy penalty. It'll be not very fair on the part of Europe and American to expect for Ukraine to fight on without the support of right equipment, weapon systems, especially air defense systems, and also on the ground, artillery and rocket launcher systems. Pia.
Sir, one last question. What do you make of NATO's response to the drone incursions that have taken place? Operation Eastern Sentry has been launched, but Zelensky says that a stronger response is the need of the hour. Is NATO's current posture strategically calibrated to avoid an all-out war with Russia?
Well, absolutely, because NATO doesn't want an all-out war. Yet they don't want to give a free pass to Russians to violate the airspace of NATO countries like Poland, Estonia at will. But two things are very important to note here. I think the NATO response are very calibrated. They have taken these violations very seriously, and they have spoken in no uncertain terms that they will respond in case Russia continues to take such aggressive hostile action. At the same time, I don't think NATO is keen to lock horns with Russia directly. At this while, they are very, I think, concerned about the latest escalation by Russia, but they would not like to escalate to such an extent that this becomes a direct confrontation between Russia and NATO forces. So I think they had taken a calibrated action, and they also given a strong message to Russia that should such violation or hostile act continue, NATO will respond, and they are already rejigging their plans, and also they are assured the countries which are directly facing Russia that their support is assured by way of relocating the resources, especially in terms of the air power. So what I feel is that NATO response were calibrated, but yet it is not very proactive. At the same time, they have given a message to Russia that should such a activity continue, the response will be robust and stronger. But as far as Ukraine is concerned, they would like far more, I think, a proactive stance on the part of NATO. But I think NATO countries are very well aware that escalation is not the way forward. Yet Russia must be restrained, and therefore calibrated responses is the way forward. Pia.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking out time, sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we shift focus towards updates coming in. The European Union chief, Antonio Costa, has now stated that the victory for Moldova's ruling pro-EU party in their key parliamentary elections was a loud and clear message. He has also stated that the people of Moldova have spoken, and their message, they've chosen democracy, reform and a European future in the face of pressure and interference, as has been alleged on behalf of Russia. The EU stands with Moldova is what he has emphasized upon. Now, Moldova's pro-EU ruling party has won the key parliamentary elections with more than 50% of the vote. With over 99.5% ballots counted, the Party of Action and Solidarity, headed by President Maia Sandu, has garnered 50.05% of the vote share as compared to 24.25% secured by the pro-Russian Patriotic Electoral Bloc. Now, some locals have reacted to this. Listen in to what they've had to say.
And I think a lot of young people started to go vote, me included. I voted for the first time. And I think we have a bright future ahead of us. Because that's how it's in the other countries from the Europe. And I traveled, I saw how it is. And I think that's how it's going to be for us too.
Sperăm ca să schimbe. Dacă orice om vrea ca să fie bine în Moldova, ca să avem muncă, să avem salariu bune, să nu plece nimeni peste hotare. Asta e.
Now, Moldova has been vying for EU membership for quite a while. It applied and was granted candidate status in 2022, and accession negotiations also commenced last year. Now, with that, and with President Sandu's pro-European Union party now returning to power with a majority, the larger questions that loom is whether this process is likely to be accelerated and what are the geopolitical implications for Russia. Shifting focus to more developments coming in, this time from the United States of America. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has hailed the release of American citizen Amir Amiri from Taliban custody, calling it an important step, but has also urged the return of all remaining U.S. nationals held in Afghanistan. Rubio has also thanked Qatar for mediating the deal and has further stressed that U.S. President Donald Trump will not rest until every American detained abroad is brought home. The Taliban regime freed Amiri following a visit by Washington's hostage envoy Adam Boehler. Amiri, who had been detained since December 2024, was flown to Doha after his release. The release of Amiri marks the fifth instance this year that Qatari diplomacy has been able to secure the release of Americans from Taliban detention, and also a British couple who were held by Taliban for months. Now, the move comes days after President Trump demanded the Taliban to hand back control of the Bagram air base and even warned of serious consequences if they refused. Meanwhile, families of other detainees claim that they have been promised that no Americans will be left behind. Shifting focus to East Asia, China's Premier Li Qiang has stated that Beijing is willing to continue to deepen cooperation with North Korea to better safeguard common interests. He has also stressed that China is willing to enhance strategic communications with Pyongyang. According to reports, the Chinese premier met North Korean Foreign Minister Cho Son-hui in Beijing. It was their second high-level meeting this month. Both sides vowed to strengthen ties, oppose hegemonism and reach consensus on regional and global issues. The talks followed Kim Jong-un's visit to Beijing for the Victory Day parade, where he met Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, speculation is growing that Xi Jinping may attend Pyongyang's October 10th parade, marking the 80th anniversary of the Workers' Party. With us on the broadcast is Dr. Sanjay Kumar, journalist at the Korea Herald, joining us from Seoul. Thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. At the outset, as far as this readout is concerned, what in your assessment are these common interests that are being referred to here?
Pia, there are common interests, but it's a very measured approach from Pyongyang as well as Beijing, because they have not said something new in their tone, and they have not signaled something new. And this is, of course, it is an extended version of the discussion that was about to held after the victory parade and with the attendance of Kim Jong-un there. So the approach is very measured from both the countries. And from North Korean perspective, they want to send a signal to the US that they are not going to be offensive on their tone. And from North Korean perspective, there is also a Chinese form of diplomacy here working, because China has softened the tone when you see the bilateral summit and the discussion they held a few weeks back. They have softened. I mean, China has softened the tone when it comes to denuclearization of North Korea. So this is strategic signaling.
Speaking of that, I was in fact going to address that. We've seen the meeting that has taken place. In the readout, as you've mentioned, there was no mentioning of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. A lot of people read this as a diplomatic win for Pyongyang, as China has repeatedly raked up the removal of nuclear weapons. And even though Beijing has not formally endorsed North Korea as a nuclear power, what does, in your assessment, in your view, this particular shift signal, and how is Seoul viewing this?
This signals that North Korea somehow is ready to step up the cooperation with China from economic perspective, and they want to use Chinese relationship with North Korea in order to minimize the negative perceptions on UN sanctions, and they want to send a signal to the US also that, look, we are in the dialogue table, we are on the dialogue channel at least. So that is why they are trying to show that to the US as well as China at the same time that we are strategically communicating. And from Chinese perspective, it is going to be very fruitful because they have to deal with US in negotiations. But from South Korean perspective, just 1 week ago, Wang Yi and the Cho Hyun, the foreign minister of South Korea, met. And, there are discussions that they are the highest leadership of South Korea, I mean, President Lee Jae-myung and President Xi is about to meet in the APEC summit. So this is this meeting, I mean the Choi meeting with Wang Yi is coming up with little shock, but South Koreans are still very positive when it comes to see anything happening in the form of dialogue. So there is no setback for Seoul in current times.
In fact, speaking about Lee Jae-myung, what and where do you see his efforts and the olive branch that he's been extending heading to next?
See, from President Lee from President Lee Jae-myung's perspective, he wants a very peaceful Korean Peninsula, as well as he wants to have a peaceful coexistence with North Korea. And on that front, he is ready to somehow compromise with the denuclearization agenda. That is why he has proposed a rapprochement policy of a three-step policy through engage North Korea somehow. And the DP, the Democratic Party of Lee Jae-myung, looks very determined on this front. And they think that the conservative blocs, the governments of conservative bloc in South Korea, like under Park Geun-hye, under Lee Myung-bak, or even the former Yoon Suk-yeol, had not been trying to engage North Korea in a positive way. And instead, these administrations were making North Korea more hostile. So he wants to change the pattern, and he wants to go to the dialogue diplomacy, and somehow, no matter the results are negative in current circumstances, the South Korean government doesn't want to lose hope, and they want to keep engaging North Korea. So this is not seen as a big surprise right now, but of course, observers in Seoul, including the government and the NIS, is closely looking on these developments.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus towards more updates coming in. Typhoon Waloi continues to wreak havoc in the Philippines and in Vietnam. Now, according to civil defense officials, at least 24 people have lost their lives in the Philippines. 10 of them were killed in the province of Biliran alone. In Vietnam, meanwhile, 11 people have lost their lives and 17 others are missing. The typhoon has damaged houses and knocked out power grids, and also brought flooding and huge swells before losing some of its strength as it headed towards Laos. Meanwhile, Vietnam has closed airports and evacuated thousands of people located in vulnerable areas. Reports say that the typhoon was generating winds of speeds up to 133 km per hour. Residents from Vietnam have in fact reacted. Let's listen in to what they've had to say.
Quá khủng khiếp, và nói chung là 38 năm trong cuộc đời rồi mới thấy một cái cơn bão nó to và nó giật mạnh như thế. Cả đêm ngủ là không ngủ được, dàn tôn là giật đùng cả đêm. Cửa kiếc như là sập, giật cả đêm, nên là cảm nhận của mình thì thấy nó quá ghê gớm, quá sức tưởng tượng.
Bão rít rất mạnh, nó qua gần như là mình ở tên tòa bên chung cư thế này thì gần như bắc qua là người dân là thức cả đêm, và đa số là người dân toàn là biếu cửa. Như cơn bão trước thì người dân gần như không thích vít cửa, chứ bây giờ người dân toàn là vít cửa để mà giữ khỏi nó bung đấy. Gọi là toàn khu dân cư là gần như là thức trắng đêm đấy.
Bão thì chứng kiến được nhiều cơn bão rồi, nhưng mà cơn bão này nếu mà báo về sức gió ấy, thì cơn bão này là sức gió lớn nhất từ trước đến tới nay ấy.
With that, viewers, it's a wrap on this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned.